The most powerful mini PC is here. It is from AtomMan, which is a sub-brand of Minis Forum. The model, the G7 PT, and what it has is some incredible power, especially the CPU. It is the Ryzen 9 7945HS. Now, this particular part here has a huge amount of cores and threads. 16 cores, 32 threads. It's an absolute monster. It turbos at 5.4 gigahertz, and as you see later with my benchmarks, it's incredible the kind of performance you're getting. Now, it does have discrete graphics, so a dedicated GPU. It is the Radeon 7600M XT with 8 gigabytes of dedicated RAM. This model has Wi-Fi 7 and even PCIe 5.0 support. It's not populated with an SSD, so you have to supply one of those yourself. And my configuration here has 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM running at 5200 mega transfers and a 1 terabyte PCIe 4 SSD. Let's take a look at what we do get included with the G7 PT. So there's this little card there just telling you that if the boot time is slow than normal, that's probably because of a BIOS reset, or if you replace the RAM, that's the reasoning why. We got our power cable right here. This is our stand, which I like. Now, they're using magnets in this, with magnets on the base of the mini PC. So that means that when you put them together, it'll hold it in place. The magnets are strong. You don't need to screw this base in, which is good. There's this strange cutout to one side, and that is for the power cable, as you'll see shortly. Rubber on the back of it here, so it's not going to slip off a table or anything, which is good. And our power supply, that is just massive. Look at how huge this is. But it makes sense because it is 300 watts, the rating of this. We've got some powerful hardware inside, so it makes sense. They needed to go big with the power supply. So you can see on one side, we have this grill here with the 2 fans. They've got some beefy cooling in this, and I'll be reporting on the thermals and fan noise later in this review. The spiderweb design here does give it a bit of a gamer look, but it's more the other side with the LED, the RGB. That's quite a bit gamery, but I believe you can turn it off, or at least unplug that if you didn't want it. So to gain access to the internals, you are going to have to remove this grill here. It's very stubborn to get off the first attempt. Now, there is a little gap here, so use a pry tool. Work around here, and then I managed to then be able to pry it up, and I'll just remove this now so you can see the 2 coolers there. So if you were going to be doing a bit of maintenance on this, cleaning the dust out, it shouldn't be too hard without having to open everything up, which I'll show you shortly when we take a look at the internals. So let's have a look at the ports first of it. You can see front ports here, so we have USB 3.2, this is Gen 2, but it doesn't support video out. That's the one on the rear that does. Control here for the fan modes, and you can see status LEDs here. This is USB Type A 3.2 Gen 2, and a 3.5 millimeter with mic support, so the combo port there, but on the back, they do still have the separate audio jacks. 2.5 gigabit LAN port right there, and 3 Type A's there, USB 3.2 Gen 2, and here is our full spec Type C port. Well, with the video out, the data at those USB 3.2 Gen 2 speeds. However, no power delivery makes sense because this unit here needs a lot of power. HDMI 2.1 and DisplayPort 1.4 there, so you can run 3 displays, which is excellent. This is where the hot air comes out. Along the top, we have our power on, and this is another lot of vents here, so a lot of hot air will be coming out of that. So cooling looks pretty good. It does feel quite heavy too, very solid, the build of this. Down the bottom, that is where you'll find the power plug there, so it's not a standard one, but I do remember a lot of old gaming laptops used to have this plug here, which can deliver a lot of power. They've got up to 300 watts, 4 rubber feet, and this is what it is going to be sitting on. There's some magnets in here too, so this is when you put it onto the stand, it's just going to rest up against there, and it's good that because we don't have to screw anything into place. And this is how it is plugged in, so you just push that in like so, and then this with the magnets, you can feel it pull, and it clips into place like so, and there we go. That is now the stand in there, and the magnet, just trying to remove that, it's very strong, so it won't just slip off the stand at all. And let's take a peek at the internals, of course. Now, I won't be doing a full teardown because it does have liquid metal applied there, and I don't want to disturb that. I want to keep it exactly how it is out of the factory. So let me remove all of the screws here. Right, so this should then just pull off, which it does, and we're presented with this part just being, wow, that's all the cooling for this. So this is a bit trickier than I had hoped for. I really wish they'd made this a little easier. So you need to lift up this part here, but you've got a cable that you need to unplug. You can see the cooler here, and we've got a cooler for, this is for the SSDs that are going to obviously be below this. This is our RAM, so we can easily access the RAM. We've got Wi-Fi 7 card right here, and there are some cables, and the Wi-Fi plugs there, you want to be careful you don't actually damage those either. And there are some plugs here that plug into the RGB, which is on this side right here. So if you really want to turn that off, you can jump in here, unplug those completely. But I believe through the BIOS, we should be able to do that anyway. But I'll show you that shortly. Let me just open this up a little bit more. So there you go. You can see we have a lot of stuff plugged in here. So you need to be really careful with what you're doing. And I'd only go here if it's an absolute must, if you're going to be adding, say, an upgrade to the SSD. So there's two slots in here, 2280s. We've got PCIe 5.0 and PCIe 4.0 there, RAM. So you can go up to 90, oh, I actually no, sorry, it's 64 gigabytes with this chipset, I believe, is the maximum. And the speed is 5200 megahertz or mega transfers. Now I have removed the screws for our big heatsink here. There is a cable that plugs into the fan for our SSD cooler. Now those SSDs get incredibly hot, so very good move for them to do this, especially PCIe 5.0 SSDs. They literally cook themselves. So we can see we have here the two slots, so one there, thermal pad that still has the plastic on that, of course, you need to remove when you do install your own SSD. Thermal pad here, which applies very good contact. So this is a terabyte, this drive here. And the boot drive that they have used is PCIe 4.0, not PCIe 5.0, which is quite expensive, and it makes sense they didn't go with that. But if you want an ultra-fast drive, then you can slot it into the PCIe 5.0 slot there. Brand components have been used. Kingston for our RAM, Kingston for the SSD, and MediaTek for that Wi-Fi 7 card. Wi-Fi antennas are in a good location, so the front and the rear of it, so there's just one here I can see, the others just here. It's a good location. It's the plastic that's against it, so it's not going to inhibit or cause any problems with that signal strength. Here we are in the BIOS of our G7 PT. So there are a few options in here you can tweak, but not a massive amount. Now under AMB CBS, you can go into this one here, the SMU common options, and system configuration to set a power limit. Now I keep it in auto, and auto, what I'll show you later on, it does use up to 135 watts, 120 watts or so in between there, but then you can set it to 45, 55, or 75 if you want. There's the TJ Max if you wanted to increase that, but I recommend that you don't actually touch that one. Other options in here to do with our graphics configuration. I would go into this and I would just disable the integrated graphics because you don't need that Radeon 610 at all. It's doing nothing because we have the dedicated discrete graphics anyway. And there's another thing under here too that I can show you, which is we have our hardware monitor, so you can tweak the CPU fan. There's a smart fan here too as well for the SSD. So that is enabled by default, and you can tweak those if you wanted to. You can see down here the DDR fan. I think there isn't actually one there anyway, because that's to do, the RAM doesn't have that, doesn't really need it, I don't think. I've seen the temperatures have been fine. And then under the CPU configuration, or I saw somewhere in here, I can't remember where it is, onboard devices, no, somewhere there too. There it is. Yeah, onboard devices. To disable the RGB. Very important. If you don't want that blingy, flashy, cartoonist style signatures on the outside. I'm not really that fond of it personally, so I would be setting that to disable there. And yes, you can set it to reboot on the loss of power if you're going to be using this as a server if you wanted to, or you just wanted it to always be on. The G7 PT ships with Windows 11 Home. You can always upgrade that to Pro if you need. So our chipset, that Ryzen 9 7945HX, it's quite a beast. 16 cores, 32 threads, and they're not those E-cores either. These are proper 16 cores, proper full power ones. And you see that with the benchmarks too that I'm about to show you. So the GPU, that is the Radeon RX 7600 XT. It's about the same level of an RTX 4060, really, more or less. Very, very similar there. You can see it's using DDR6 RAM from Samsung. They have set minis for them a power limit of 120 watts for this GPU, which is very good. So it means it's not going to be throttling. It's not going to be bottlenecked by the power limit at all. Now, I just want to demonstrate here too that the kind of power that you can pull here, once I stress the CPU, you see it's going to hold this 14,000, around about 14,700, and it's pulling package power 134 watts. It's kind of crazy on this, and it normally drops down to about 125 watts, but it will hold that performance. It really doesn't throttle. You can see out of my time testing it. In fact, it's been going a lot longer than this. I accidentally closed it, and it just doesn't throttle. But the thermals, we can talk about them now a little bit. We'll get up to about 90 degrees. You'll see here in the cores. So it will get warm, but 91, 94 there. But I haven't seen any thermal throttling. And fan noise in the performance mode, yeah, that's the downside. You're definitely going to hear it. So I'll give you a sample of that fan noise right now. This is worst case scenario, stressing out the CPU. So it's a monster of a chipset here, and impressive, even though now it's, it's not a super new chipset anymore. But look at the single core score, nearing towards 3,000. That is impressive. Even in 2024, that's very good. And the multi-core score there's no slouch, almost just shy of 16,000 points with Geekbench 6 that I'm showing you. And then if we have a look at the synthetic benchmarks, I'm not going to go overboard here with the benchmarks. I'll get more into the gaming soon. But you see times by a graphics score of just over 10,000 points. So that's where I say it's about the RTX 4060 kind of level there. And it has the same capacity of dedicated RAM to this discrete graphics, which is the 8 gigabytes. And the CPU score there, very good. 12,000, nearing towards 13,000 points there. Firestrike Ultra, this one runs in 4K, and the graphics score is 7,000. Physics, excellent, just over 40,000. So it's got a lot of power. This chipset is very good. The APU here that we have from AMD. I benchmarked our SSD, so 1 terabyte Kingston PCIe 4.0, not wonderful. The speed's pretty standard there. Of course, out of PCIe 4.0, we can get a lot faster. We can get over 7,000 reads and writes sequentials, and you can easily upgrade to a faster, better drive, or even a PCIe 5.0 drive, which are very pricey, those, but they're about double the speed of what we're looking at right now. Cinebench R23, you can see single core score almost 2,000 points, and we have 33,622. An impressive score there for multi-core performance. That's surpassing a Threadripper, the 2990WX, with its 32 cores and 64 threads, and a Xeon there, and another older Threadripper. Impressive considering how small this is, this small form factor PC. As for video decoding, the Radeon handles it fine. Our discrete graphics, this is the 4K Sony Swordsmith clip, and it's doing well. It starts out what looks like slow in the beginning there because it's kind of slow motion clip. And as I skip ahead, it's fine. In fact, I think this is doing a better job, certainly, than the graphics that I've seen was integrated graphics from Intel. Can sometimes choke and stutter a little bit with video playback, but not the case here. That is decoding that absolutely fine. No problems whatsoever. Jellyfish, 140 megabits per second, 4K file. Super smooth. Really good. No issues whatsoever. Again, if this was integrated graphics, it can sometimes stutter a little bit at the beginning, drop some frames. But no, this is running just fine there. One of the smoothest times I've actually seen it run like this, without any hiccups, without any glitches, without any dropped frames. So fantastic media playback performance. So it can decode video really well. What about encoding and 4K video editing? So here in Adobe Premiere Pro, latest version, the timeline scrubbing ahead is very fast. There really is no lags whatsoever editing one of my very old videos here. It's great. And the playback performance, okay, I have that set to just a quarter playback resolution, which I think is fine for these 100 megabit per second 4K files at 30 frames per second. So that speed is good, very smooth. What about the export times? Let's test that out now with a YouTube preset. So testing out the export time, which the Intel powered systems with QuickSync can do in around 30 seconds, normally sometimes under that. So I'll bring up my little timer here, and I've set it to the 4K YouTube preset. It's what I always test here, minute of this particular clip, just to give us an idea. So start on that and export. Now it should tear through this with the 32 threads, 16 cores, and it is. This is, look, it is using the GPU, so that is great, and that is accelerating our performance here. I better get on that timer. Okay, this is looking like record time here, thanks to the dedicated discrete graphics here. So 18 seconds, and you could factor in easily a second delay from me, so about 17 seconds. That is phenomenal. That is really quick. So great at editing 4K video, and the export times are fantastic. And gaming performance, so I bet that most people want to see this, of course, because it's really a gaming orientated, focused, small form factor PC. And this here is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And I do have it set to 4K. Just as a test here, I'm going to run the inbuilt benchmark to see, could it game at 4K? Now, I don't have any frame generation, any of those kind of special AMD things on. This is all of that sort of stuff off. And we'll have a look at the performance. Okay, so as I expected, not good at 4K. It's just 36 average there frames per second. I'm going to try now 1080p, which is more or less what this mini PC is going to be about, 1080p gaming. A lot better. At the high preset, this is looking like it's going to be almost around 100 frames per second average, but I'll show you now the end result. Turned out to be a good result, 111 frames per second. Fallout 4, this is with the next gen patch, and of course the TV series is wonderful, and that kind of brought me back into this game, into this world. I think a lot of people too. So running the game at 4K ultra settings, it can handle it. As you can see, this is good, and it seems to be always a steady 60. Now maybe it's just me, but I can't seem to find a way to turn off the VSync, so I'm locked at 4K 60 here. 60 hertz is the max, and 60 frames per second it is because of that VSync limit there. But I did notice a couple of frame dips now and then. There's a lot of action on screen, so with the flamethrower here, see what happens. If it's going to slow down. No, it's alright. It seems to be okay at the moment. Very steady frame rate if I'm locked down and capped at that 60, unfortunately, because of the VSync option being forced on. Cyberpunk 2077, I have it set to the high preset, so there's no frame generation or any of that on, at 1080p, and it's faring fine so far, well over 100 frames per second, but let's take a look at the end result here with the in-game benchmark. So the result was 119.12 frames per second average at 1080p, not bad. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I have it set to 1440p, the graphics preset is high, I'll run the in-game benchmark and I'll show you the result. So the result is 101 average frames per second at 1440p. The Witcher 3 now with the big 4.0 patch. This is in an area that is very demanding. That's why I like to test it out. It can be quite difficult for some GPUs, but this is coping really well. High preset setting for visuals, 1080p only, and very playable, well over 100 frames per second, as you can see. Finally, Linux support very quickly here. Good news, everything does seem to work with Linux Manjaro that I have used here to test out. So the wireless is working, the Bluetooth, LAN port, graphics, everything seems to be just fine here with the open source drivers too, by the way. Okay, so recapping now, there's a lot to like about this mini PC. It has some crazy power, especially that CPU. It's an absolute monster. The 16 cores, 32 threads, and it gets a Cinebench score R32 of over 32,000 points, beating some of those monster Threadripper chips. So it's really impressive considering how small it is. But of course, it's not the smallest mini PC out there. It's a small form factor PC. Now, the port selection, very good. My criticism only from this mini PC, really, with its ports, is I really wish there was USB 4, but the chipset, I don't believe, no, it doesn't support it. We have the Type-C USB 3.2, at least with video out, data, but no power delivery, of course. It would never be able to power the kind of power that this does need, which is, well, the power supply is 300 watts. So I have seen the APU, the chipset in this, the CPU pulling 135 watts, which is phenomenal, and the GPU can go up to 120, but normally it sits around the 90-100 watt mark. And the thermals have been good. It did get up to 93 degrees, but no thermal throttling. It didn't end up cooking itself, and the fan noise, it can get a little loud in that performance mode, but you can also put it into the quiet mode or just the normal workload mode, and it's not bad at all then. The sample I gave you was worst case running Cinebench, so that was working all of those cores and threads, and you're not really going to be pushing it that hard, but gaming at the same time with demanding games, it's a little tiny loud. So that's the second con, but otherwise it's a mini PC that's got a lot of power. The RGB that you can customize on the outside of it here. Two famous cartoonists. Now, the design that it comes with is fine, but I'm not really into that. I will disable it in the BIOS and turn that off. And what really did surprise me is the way this handles video editing at 4K is just so good with the discrete graphics. It's just so much better, of course, than integrated. All up, it's an excellent system. And Minis Forum, or should I say AtomMan now, with this side brand from them, they really are heading in, I think, the right direction and getting a place in that niche there that's a bit different, having the discrete graphics and just super powerful machines like this. So thanks a lot for watching this in-depth, detailed review of the AtomMan G7 PT.